Where the hell did Guardians of the Galaxy come from, man? 2014 was 10 years ago and the MCU was a very different place. We had our quirky big three heroes, Iron Man, Thor and Captain America, all getting their own movies. We don't talk about the walking retcon over here. But these three characters became synonymous with starting the Marvel Cinematic Universe we know today. Marvel higher-ups must have been on some dubious amounts of black tar heroin, because imagine wrapping up the Avengers as your big start to your risky ambitious film franchise after some insanely safe films only to instantly start filming one of the most bizarre out there 180 tone flip train wrecks in the making with Guardians of the Galaxy. In this video I'm going to gush over Guardians of the Galaxy and share my thoughts and feelings on how the Guardians project saved the MCU. I'm going to discuss some of the incredibly risky, unambitious decisions that could have just easily have ended the MCU with Guardians of the Galaxy. So if you like this video, subscribe as it helps me know what kind of content you want more of. So, Marvel had their demographic locked in, they had these safe characters they could slap on pajamas, but have high quality movies that can be enjoyed by kids, adults, neckbeards, everyone. Okay, now let's make a film about some random obscure D-list Marvel characters, cherry picked out of the runts of the comic library, and how about we set it in a completely separate corner of the galaxy to our safe little shindig we have right now on Earth. This is going to be a fun little side plot experiment to go on whilst our main story is barely getting its feet as it is. Not only that, let's get some random cast of actors to fill in the cast of our crazy experiment, but only after we completely redesign and reimagine these already obscure characters. Oh yeah, let's get that cute pudgy guy from Parks and Rec to play our buff main character. Let's get Bradley Cooper from The Hangover, I guess, to play a talking raccoon. Or how about that blue bitch from Avatar? Yeah, she'd be cool. Okay, hear me out. Now let's get a fucking wrestler. And how about we pay loads of our budget to get Vin Diesel? Yeah, let's get him to come in and play a tree man and say 3 words the entire film. But that's not all. Let's have it directed by the best upcoming director in Hollywood, James Gunn, most famous for his work on Movie 43 and Scooby-Doo. What were they actually smoking? I want some. I was dragged to the cinema to watch Guardians Volume 1 by my family back in 2014, and I was not feeling it whatsoever. And by the time the film was over, my whole outlook on the potential of Marvel and its ambitious film franchise in the making was literally rammed into my system. This film butt-sexed me in the most sensual yet life-changing way imaginable, and I was fully indoctrinated into the Guardians fandom, and apparently so was the rest of the world. This was the most highly performing MCU movie they put out at the time, which was ironic since everyone thought this was going to be the first flop. The side plot movie, the movie directed by the Mystery Gang. This side plot saved the MCU. I call these movies side plots, and yeah, I think that's true for the most part, especially Volume 1 and 2. And look, I know that sounds bad, but come on. Side plots in fiction are defined as the following. A subplot or side story is a secondary strand of the plot that is supporting side story for any story of the main plot. Subplots may connect to the main plots in either time and place or thematic significance. Guardians of the Galaxy 1 took place whilst the main events of Avengers were taking place. The MCU is very clearly an overarching narrative, so let's just agree that by some definition Guardians can be considered a side plot, alright? And that isn't even a dig, that's the whole reason these movies worked. Marvel had big ambitions, and they were here for the long run as we know today, for better or worse. But taking into account that they wanted to start making setup movies, it wasn't a surprise in retrospect to see a movie like Guardians 1 come to fruition. It made perfect sense. Marvel wanted to tell a unique story that linked to the main overarching MCU narrative, whilst not interfering with it directly, so as to not risk damaging the brand that sells the pajamas and toothbrushes. They just needed an expendable movie to expand their universe, quite literally in this case. They needed some way to expand their universe without sending their normal cast out there to space, which would have been unrealistic and jumping the shark a little bit. I know we had 4, but it was a bit of a stretch to send the rest there. So they got some random characters from the comics that could fit the bill. They were space heroes, they were expendable, so no one really needed to be invested in these guys too much. The Guardians were here to just deliver the narrative and set up the Infinity Stones. They were here to expand the universe a little to ease in the rest of the safer Marvel movies into some of these out there narratives to come. I don't think Marvel fans ever expected this movie to be good. Hell, it seems like neither did Marvel. Otherwise, why would you get the Scooby-Doo director? What ended up happening was every single person involved in the movie wanted to give us more movie than we ever imagined or even needed. So what happened was we were given a movie so good it can be enjoyed without any prior Marvel knowledge and can be watched separate from the rest of the MCU. That's awesome! A side plot so good it essentially became its own franchise overnight. If that comment sounds like an overstatement, take a look at the Guardians comics and the characters before and after this movie came out. The movie was so good it completely upheaved the Guardians' portrayal in the comics to match their on-screen counterparts. The Guardians were now mainstream, and just like myself, everyone pretended to have always loved them. So why specifically was Guardians Volume 1 so beloved? Let's just keep this segment brief since you already heard me talk about how high quality this first film was. But I think it's important to discuss all the factors that made this film great and made it stand out as its own masterpiece, unshackling itself from just being a side plot setup movie. Now hear me out. In fiction, I'm usually a very big fan of character over plot. What I mean is I tend to enjoy seeing character dynamics unfold and character development more than I actually enjoy seeing said characters just exist to beat the baddie and unveil some twists in the plot. And my god, Guardians are some of the best character relationships and dynamics I've ever seen in a movie. Every single one of these characters bounces off each other amazingly, and one of them can't even talk. The witty back and forth, the bickering, the heartfelt compassion some of the characters shared. Jesus Christ! You have to pause the film to realise that you're watching a talking raccoon give life advice about grief and responsibility to a f***ing wrestler in full body paint. It's so deadpan, it's amazing. It goes to show you can take anything seriously no matter the context. Guardians doesn't even have to have depressing dialogue to show seriousness. Even the comedy conveys sincerity and passion, because the lines are delivered in full confidence and charm, bolstering the more serious moments due to us understanding these characters through various moments with different tones like comedy. I can't really think of a moment in this film that wasn't needed to create such powerful character relationships and growth. The movie is sincere, hilarious, well paced, and delivered its promise to Marvel in full force to set up their universe. I forgot I was even talking about the MCU whilst writing this portion, because I value the Guardians movie so highly for being so much more than its original intention. So much so that it stands on its own 2 feet and its own perfect movie in my mind. It's all well and good creaming my pants over the first Guardians movie, but the meat of this video is how important these films were to the MCU in terms of thematic influence, tone, and direction. Guardians proved to Marvel that fans were happy with experimentation and taking goofy concepts and running with them with sincerity and heart. Before Guardians Volume 2 came out, Marvel released Ant-Man and Doctor Strange. Argue all you want about the quality and tone of these two movies, but both have stupid concepts. Let's introduce the quantum realm and a man that goes small in Ant-Man. And let's introduce the secret world of magic into the MCU with Doctor Strange. Guess what? Guardians was a stupid concept too, and these two films were well received by audiences because of the sincerity and effort put into making these fantastical ideas work within the universe. Marvel had their cinematic universe now. Thanks to the success of Guardians, they knew they could expand their universe without regarding these films as nothing more than filler or side plots, for a little bit at least. The tone and deadpan energy of Guardians made its way into some of these next films too. The wit and positive energy exuded by Guardians 1's silliness was very successful and allowed Marvel to have more fun with their characters, rather than just have them be there to serve the plot as static, emotionless plot mules. People can trash Marvel humour as much as they want, but this era of Marvel had it nailed down. They knew when to be funny and when to be serious. Guardians helped Marvel strike a consistent tone with their movies that channeled high positive energy that meshed satisfyingly well when carefully integrated into its serious plots and themes. So carrying on the tradition of being the little side plot that could of the MCU, Guardians Volume 2 released, and people were mixed. Now this one really felt like a side plot, and yeah, I get it. It's just a space adventure that only relates to these characters and has no major overarching purpose for the MCU. Or does it? Now remember me coping by saying I love character over plot? Well, this movie is the embodiment of that artistic take on media. Volume 2 was all about the characters, their history, their purpose, and most importantly their relationships. The characters are so much closer by the end of the movie than they ever were in Volume 1. Peter having to weigh his priorities between his old family and new one with Gamora and Yondu, Gamora and Nebula reconciling, Rocket finding his place in the team alongside his new responsibility with Baby Groot as a blatant walking marketable metaphor, and then we have Drax laughing. No, in all seriousness, Drax being somewhat of the comic relief is both hilarious and heartbreaking, as we see him at peace with his past thanks to his new life and positive relationship with the Guardians. To a lot of people, they just want to see action and spectacle from their movies, which is why I think a lot of people regard this film as unimportant and the awkward middle child. However, I personally think that thanks to the character developments in this film, the plot developments in the later MCU movies would not have been as strong if not for the work this film put into setting up some serious stakes. They added added some depth and weight that the MCU stories can have on its real feeling vulnerable characters to make a more investable, believable story. So Guardians Volume 1 challenged the status quo and tone of the MCU for the better. Guardians Volume 2 also developed its own narrative and character dynamics that cemented these characters as meaningful people within the universe whose actions and hardships have an easier time being impactful and investable in any story they are placed in. So now it's only natural that the Guardians make their way out of the side plot and into the main MCU continuity in Avengers Infinity War. At the time the movie was announced, Marvel made a big deal about advertising the Guardians' big inclusion in the movie. They knew full well they were keeping them as their own little pocketed side story. Infinity War was what Marvel had been setting up for their previous 18 movies. I think it was 18. This event had to be big, and of course they couldn't do it without the Guardians, hailing from the movie that launched Marvel in this direction in the first place. Everyone was here. Every hero was involved and no one was excluded, I think. Seeing the Guardians interact with the likes of Thor, Iron Man, Spider-Man, it was all very fanservicey and it was well deserved. The Guardians team can bounce off each other so well, so it's only natural that pairing these with multiple new heroes would work the same. And what a delight it was to see that unfold. They brought their charm, experience and abilities to the forefront and helped drive the plot as their story was directly entwined into the narrative. This was especially relevant since Gamora was the daughter of Thanos, the big bad, and so the rest of the MCU cast was trying to stop Thanos too for the rest of the film. It all fell into place so smoothly. It really did fall into place. It truly fell. The Guardians by the end of Infinity War were locked in. These characters have just suffered their most brutal loss yet, and the emotional weight and depth these characters have developed has just been unleashed onto the main overarching story. Peter's impulsiveness out of rage and grief over this justifiably devastating sudden loss of Gamora led to Thanos getting what he needed to destroy half the universe. We felt that. We understood his rage, we just got it. And we know the Guardians are now locked in as we feel that intensity and weight that's been channeled throughout their movies, as we can't bear to see these characters we invested ourselves in suffer. I haven't talked about any specific character too much yet, and for good reason. They're a unit, they're a team, but the end of Infinity War challenged that concept. What if they were no longer a team? What if one member who had the most to lose lost them all? Rocket's story in Guardians is a colossal one that I would love to do an entire video on in the future. This grungy little knobhead is probably my most favourite Marvel character. Hell, probably one of my most favourite fictional characters ever. Rocket was the last surviving Guardian in Infinity War, at least in the sense that most of the team no longer existed. He was alone. His entire team was either killed or snapped, including Groot, his most loyal companion. They even confirmed afterwards that when Groot spoke to Rocket as he disappeared in his arms, he was actually saying Dad. I don't normally get emotional in movies, but my god, that got me. My god, seeing Rocket alone was gut-wrenching. Rocket's past was still a bit of a mystery at this point, but we saw his character flourish and grow through actions, not just words. His tight-knit connection to his team was quite literally snapped, and we felt that emotion because Marvel earned that reaction through the previous Guardians movies' developments. So, onto Avengers Endgame, the final movie in the Infinity Saga. We expected Rocket to continue the Guardians' legacy in some way, helping the Avengers to save the day and bring everyone back from the sidelines in parallel to the way Volume 1 was a sideline to the whole MCU narrative. Well, we were wrong. Marvel did something insane. Marvel turned one of the silliest out there characters put onto their screens and truly gave him the title of Guardian of the Galaxy. He is a talking comic relief CGI raccoon with no flashy powers, yet he becomes one of the most important characters in this entire universe. Not only does he help the Avengers understand the logistics of the Infinity Stones, including divulging crucial information and resources on obtaining 2 of the 6 stones. This little scrungly dude was part of the 3-man team responsible for creating time travel, which of course ultimately helps them obtain the stones to reverse the snapping. Marvel really could have not taken the higher risk having the silly comic relief CGI side plot character be part of the integral story, but they did. They treated him with seriousness and sincerity, giving the respect he deserves, cementing my previous points earlier about being able to tell grounded, emotional stories despite the silliness of a concept. Being able to tell this story using such a grounded and emotional character, carrying the weight of his entire Guardian's legacy on his small shoulders, was truly marvellous. Rocket desperately wanted his family back, much like us the audience couldn't bear to see him alone either. And thus, the Guardians are snapped back into reality, all the heroes save the day, and Star-Lord gets kicked in the balls. Endgame is considered by many Marvel fans to be the end of the MCU, and I agree to an extent. In my mind, anything that came after has been DLC, I guess? Don't get me wrong, some of it is really good. I mean, really good. I love Loki so much. I spent hours creating an artistic little graph trying to understand the lore that came from that show. But a lot of it feels directionless, which is probably because it is. The Infinity Saga has ended, and everything the MCU was setting up had paid off. So where did the Guardians go from here, since their ultimate purpose has ended? Well, nowhere. No, I mean literally nowhere. They are just chilling on this celestial head nowhere. The Guardians first existed to set up more Marvel movies, then came into their own and set up the direction and tone of the MCU going forwards. Then they became integral to the main overarching narrative of the MCU, and ultimately helped bring about what they started to a close. So yeah, I think they've officially saved the MCU. But like I said, they have nowhere to go, so it's only natural that their story would come to a close. At least this team of Guardians we know of today. James Gunn stayed signed up to Marvel to direct the first Marvel Christmas special and one more Guardians movie. This was before he got signed up to DC to hop over to their main competitor to save their cinematic universe. If that's not a good enough alone reason to solidify his movies as saving the MCU, then I don't know what is. He wrapped up the Guardians, dropped the first F-bomb in the MCU and flew off to save the DCU. The Christmas special was okay, it was about as good as you could expect. It was just a fun romp around their new home, but it did set up a crucial plot for the third movie about Peter's depression over losing Gamora. But let's not lose any daylight over that rotoscoped filler blipped in the Guardians brand. So let's quickly discuss the third and final Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and how it respects what the Guardians was and finalises its own narrative that it earned, despite the Guardians initially being a throwaway set of nothing characters. Volume 3 focuses a lot on Peter and Rocket's trauma, and their importance to the Guardians as team members, and their identities to the Guardians brand we know. The plot explores Peter's depression over losing Gamora as he attempts to save a critically injured Rocket, mirroring his denial to lose anyone close to him again. Rocket also deals with his own trauma and reconciles with his own character to conclude his story arc as the creep, the weirdo. I know I'm glossing over this last movie a lot, but this movie really is Rocket's movie, and I want to make an entire video dedicated to him in the future, since I don't think having a portion of this video will do him any justice. Either way, this final movie sends off its characters in respectful and natural ways, whether that's resolving looming character baggage like with Peter and Gamora, or just bringing things to a natural conclusion to end things whilst it's still in high regard by fans. Despite coming after Endgame, the movie proves why Guardians of the Galaxy should be respected, even after their purpose is over. They truly were the Guardians of the MCU.